Now, with me now is an old colleague and traveling companion, the former U.S. Congresswoman, former presidential candidate, Cynthia McKinney. She joined me on one of our convoys to Gaza. She's tried many times to get into Gaza. Israel has been determined to stop her.
26 minutes after the hour, continuing our breaking news coverage of the crisis in the Middle East. And earlier this morning, we told you about a 66-foot pleasure boat, the Dignity, which had been trying to deliver medical supplies, urgently needed medical supplies, to Gaza City. That boat, while, according to our CNN reporter Carl Penhall, who was on it at the time, was in international waters, was rammed by an Israeli patrol boat. And there you see the boat itself had to make way back to Tyre in Lebanon as it was taking on water. Also on board that craft was former Georgia Congresswoman, former presidential candidate Cynthia McKinney, and she joins us now via the internet from Tyre in Lebanon. And Congresswoman McKinney, can you tell us what happened? We had our Carl Penhall saying that you were in international waters, clearly in international waters, when accosted by and confronted by these Israeli patrol boats.
Well, I wouldn't call it accosting. I would call it ramming. Let's just call it as it is. Our boat was rammed 3 times, twice in the front and 1 on the side. But let me also state for the record that what we experienced earlier today pales in comparison to what the people of Gaza are experiencing right now as we do this interview.
We have been watching former Georgia Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney because she's traveling in the Muslim world saying awful things about her own country.
The fact of the matter is that the American people, by a vast majority, agree with me that we need to bring our war dollars home.
In 2005, when Representative Cynthia McKinney grilled Donald Rumsfeld during the House hearings on the 2006 budget for the U.S. Department of Defense. Let's listen to McKinney as she questions Rumsfeld on the missing trillions and hear Rumsfeld's pathetic response.
I thank the gentleman, the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. McKinney.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I watched President Bush deliver a moving speech at the United Nations in September 2003, in which he mentioned the crisis of the sex trade. The President called for the punishment of those involved in this horrible business. But at the very moment of that speech, DynCorp was exposed for having been involved in the buying and selling of young women and children. While all of this was going on, DynCorp kept the Pentagon contract to administer the smallpox and anthrax vaccines and is now working on a plague vaccine through the Joint Vaccine Acquisition Program. Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls? That's my first question. My second question, Mr. Secretary, according to the Comptroller General of the United States, there are serious financial management problems at the Pentagon, to which Mr. Cooper alluded. Fiscal year 1999, 2.3 trillion missing. Fiscal year 2000, 1.1 trillion missing. And DOD is the #1 reason why the government can't balance its checkbook. The Pentagon has claimed year after year that the reason it can't account for the money is because its computers don't communicate with each other. My second question, Mr. Secretary, is who has the contracts today to make those systems communicate with each other? How long have they had those contracts? And how much have the taxpayers paid for them? Finally, Mr. Secretary, after the last hearing, I thought that my office was promised a written response to my question regarding the 4 war games on September 11th. I have not yet received that response, but would like for you to respond to the questions that I've put to you today, and then I do expect the written response to my previous question, hopefully by the end of the week.
Thank you, Representative. First, the answer to your first question is no. Absolutely not. The policy of the United States government is clear, unambiguous, and opposed to the activities that you described. The second question.
Well, how do you explain the fact that DynCorp and its successor companies have received and continue to receive government contracts?
I would have to go and find the facts, but there are laws and rules and regulations with respect to government contracts, and there are times that corporations do things they should not do, in which case they tend to be suspended for some period. There are times then that under the laws and the rules and regulations passed by the Congress and implemented by the executive branch, that corporations can get off of out of the penalty box, if you will, and be permitted to engage in contracts with the government. They're not generally not barred in perpetuity.
This company was never in the penalty box. If you could proceed to my second question, please.
The second question, I've forgotten what the second question was.
I think Ms. Jonas knows it.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. I appreciate the question. I appreciate your interest in our department's financial condition, and we are working very hard on that program. I've just come back recently.
I understand that you're working hard on it, but my question was, who has the contract? How long have they had that contract, and how much money have we spent on it? Secretary, if the nursing home owners are arrested for negligent homicide, why shouldn't you also be arrested for negligent homicide?
It took some time for Chertoff to get back to that question, and when he did, he admitted he's still seeking answers to what went wrong after Katrina.
Certainly as the hours rolled on between Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, I pushed harder and harder about why things weren't moving. I still don't know the full story about why some things didn't move, and I will look forward to hearing the answer to that.
You were the only person in Congress to hold hearings that questioned the official cover story of the 9/11 attacks.
What I did, and basically with respect to the facts around September 11th, I held probably the first, the only open congressional briefing that included former CIA whistleblowers, former FBI whistleblowers, family members, academicians, legal scholars, experts of various sort to discuss their experiences, their research on what we now know as various aspects of September 11th.
Former Georgia Congresswoman and Green Party presidential candidate Cynthia McKinney recently returned from a fact-finding mission to Libya. She was recently in Harlem as part of a national tour as an eyewitness to President Obama's war.
During the time that I was in Congress, I was asked to take positions that were absolutely not true. But people wanted to use my black face in order to put forward their own agenda. And their own agenda was anti-black. So they wanted to use the integrity that I had. They wanted me to lease it to them for a small price with the promise. In fact, one person, a media person from New York told me that if I just took a particular stand against Sudan, that I could be in Congress for the rest of my life. But what they wanted me to say was a lie. And I did my research, as I always do my research, and I understood that what they were asking me to say was not true, and so therefore I declined.